right. Well, welcome to the Sports Guys. Another great edition we've got for you this week. We're very excited because we're finally to NFL Draft Week. How you doing, Robbie?
Doing great. We've had an amazing couple of weeks, and we're back.
Absolutely. Really excited. Last time we talked to you guys, we were broadcasting from Las Vegas. We had a great trip out there for Rob's birthday. We've done a couple of NFL Draft lead-up episodes. Of course, we had the one about the NFL offseason transactions. Hopefully, you guys took a look at that episode. We did one on the top 6 quarterbacks and some of the other quarterbacks available, and essentially predicted that there'll be about 14 total quarterbacks drafted in this NFL draft season. And then we talked about the top pass catchers, both wide receivers and tight ends. So all of those were preliminary episodes, and now we're to the big one, which is we're going to take a look at some of the big mock drafts that are out. These are final mock drafts, by the way, we're looking at this week that are just before the draft starts, which is 2 days from today, and we're real excited about it. So anyway, any general thoughts or general themes, Rob, for you this year in the NFL draft? I mean, all teams have hope, and all teams think they can improve their teams.
I'd say that this is one of the deepest drafts that I can remember in a long time. There were, incredible drafts, 83 and drafts that come to mind, but this one is extremely deep talent-wise, mainly in positions of quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, and cornerback. Those are the predominantly heavy talent areas. So, of course, me being somebody that likes scarcity,
Right.
I'm tempted to get, Brock Bowers or something like that. However, I do think you have to get your quarterback if you need one. One thing in my research that was interesting was that the number of teams that actually need a quarterback to start soon or now is pretty low. There's not that many teams that are desperate for a quarterback. The idea that in this draft, you basically cannot come away from this draft without a quarterback to get your quarterback room right. And then those 4 position groups, you really need to make sure you get somebody good. Next year, as of right now, things could change dramatically because you never know when a superstar sophomore is going to come up. But it doesn't look like nearly as good a draft next year.
Yeah, that's right.
Which tends me to believe that if I'm a general manager, I'm trading down and giving up picks so I can get more picks out of this draft.
Right.
You need more impact players because the chance of hitting on a first round is just about as high as hitting on a second round pick or a third round pick. So if you trade out of the 4th pick or 8th pick, the chance of hitting something great in early second round, meanwhile you're picking up more 3rd and 4th round picks, you're probably going to be in a healthier place, especially if you're rebuilding. If you're only a player or 2 away, you got to go get the player that you're in love with. But
Completely agree.
Yeah. So it just really depends on where teams are in their rebuild. I always start with the trenches and then work my way towards the skill positions. If you're a team that's desperate for a lot of things, I think picking a quarterback is a mistake. That's my personal opinion. I've seen too many general managers get their quarterback of the future with no offensive line. Quarterback gets broken, ends up being a bust, and he's out of there in a year or 2. Look at, how Chicago handles things, et cetera. So I feel like the way you draft really has to be determined by what your needs are, and you have to start with the most important positions. And sometimes it's not real cute and all that to go draft linemen, but that's what's necessary sometimes. So
yeah, I think for me, the general themes this year are quarterback, deepest quarterback draft we've ever had, 14 total quarterbacks likely to go in the 7 rounds of the draft. And a lot of teams, even with quarterbacks, but maybe thinking their quarterback only has a year or 2 left, i.e. a New York Jets, i.e. the Vikings who have Sam Darnold and other teams, are really tempted this year because the class is so deep to take one of those guys and let them develop for a year or 2, like a Jordan Love. So even the teams that are desperate for quarterback that'll take one at the top of the first round, that's fine. But there'll be other teams who will wait for round 2, round 3, and they'll take one of these guys and they'll develop them for a year or 2, which I think is smart. So you look at what are the position groups that are the most important in the draft every year. First is quarterback. Second is left tackle. Third is pass rusher. Fourth is cornerback. Those are the positions that you usually see scarcity the most. And those are the areas that teams, no matter what the year is, are looking for. And so, bottom line is that's what I think is going to happen. This year, we also have an unusual situation where we have also the deepest wide receiver draft ever. There's going to be temptation to take a lot of those guys really high in the first round. I don't think it's necessary, except for those top 2 or 3 guys. They'll go in the first round. To me, you could get a really solid receiver round 2, round 3, and get your scarcity guy in round 1. So that'd be what I do if I were the GM.
Me
So those
too.
are the themes that I see this year. You'll see kind of a run on quarterbacks, then you'll see kind of a run on left tackles, then you'll see a run on cornerbacks. That's generally how it happens. These guys have all their players ranked, and then when the 1 or 2 guy goes, they get a little bit desperate and they go take the third guy. So that's kind of what I see happening. All the teams know what their needs are. Teams like the Bears at the top of the list, they need a little bit of everything. They're trying to surround Caleb Williams and get him a team that can be competitive and maybe even make the playoffs right away. So, they're looking at receiver, they're looking at offensive tackle, they're looking at, of course, they're going to take Caleb Williams first. So, yeah, all these teams have a real good idea coming into the draft what they're looking for. And I personally don't think we're going to see a lot of trades. I know that some of the mocks we're about to go through show a trade-heavy draft, but I don't see that. I think a lot of teams have seen the Panthers and other teams that have really kind of mortgaged their futures, and they don't want to make the same mistake. And
Yeah, the Panthers are going to be nowhere to be found in this draft because they gambled on Bryce Young, but they could have waited till this year, and they could have had a serviceable veteran in there and given away nothing and gotten multiple picks the last 2 years. No GM wants to do that, or GMs aren't excited to do that. So in order to have trades, you have to have people willing to trade down to get lots of picks. But you have to have people willing to trade up. And when you have such a heavy an excellent draft, such a big pool of players in your skill positions, you don't need to reach like that. And so I don't think there's going to be a lot of trades.
yeah,
Um,
and Panthers are my team, but I agree. I think last year they should have traded down and gotten extra picks. They should have gotten offensive and defensive linemen. They could have started Andy Dalton for a year.
yeah,
And then this year they'd be choosing Caleb Williams. So,
yeah, exactly
and
right.
yeah,
Or
so
they'd be choosing somebody.
which is
Um,
why I think there'll be very few trades. I think the trades that do happen in the first round this year, there's only a couple likely teams that are going to do it, and we'll talk about those when we go through the mock. But teams like the Vikings, if they see the guy they want sitting there, they might go ahead and pull the trigger.
mhm.
If the Chargers get an offer at number 5, they might go ahead and trade down a couple spots because they can still get the guy that they want. So
I think the tendency of teams to trade down is going to be there. I think the reluctance of people to go up is going to be very strong. I think they're going to be very, very careful,
I think
because last year was a disaster for a
burning
few.
teams are burning the phones right now. I have no doubt there's a lot of conversations happening, but my point is that a lot of those trades aren't going to happen because teams are
Right.
much more reticent to mortgage their futures.
I've been hearing Arizona and um, New England talking about, they're using terms like it has to be a no-brainer. It has to be an offer we can't refuse. That's 2 first rounds and a second or two seconds or something like that. And there's so much talent in this draft. Why would you do that to your future?
That's right. Think
Granted,
about
some people are gambling that next year's draft isn't going to be great, is not going to be great. So give up picks in the future to get the talent now. But I just think the more picks you have in this draft, the better you're going to do in this draft.
think about the teams that have done it. Okay, there haven't been that many that have mortgaged their future. Unfortunately, my team, the Panthers, is one of them. But the 49ers did it for Trey Lance. Got completely burned by that. They lost 2 first rounders and a second rounder. Again, GMs have been watching, and they're starting to notice that those teams that do that really set themselves back for years at a time.
And the GMs get fired.
And the GMs get fired. Yep. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple mocks. There's some really good ones that came out this week. We're going to look at some of the more recent ones. All right, so this is our 13th episode. Thank you all, guys, for watching all of our episodes so far. We've really been happy how the channel's been building, and we're really excited about other content that's coming. This one is our mock draft analysis episode. The first one we're going to look at is Brendan Donahue. This is his NFL mock 4.0, his final mock right before the draft on Thursday night. And as you can see, everybody agrees, and it would be a complete, probably shock of the century if Caleb Williams did not go number one to the Chicago Bears. In terms of what the Bears' needs are right now, they need quarterback, they need wide receiver, they need edge rusher, they need offensive tackle, they need defensive tackle. So that's kind of those are the needs that they're looking for right now. Caleb Williams fits the bill. They believe they can plug him in from day one. They actually shipped Justin Fields off to the Steelers to make room for Caleb Williams to start from day one. What are your thoughts about this first pick, and do you think it's the no-brainer everybody else does?
I don't think so. I think I'm a little queasy about it. I think he has all the physical tools. I'm a little worried about his decision making. He seems kind of eccentric, kind of like Cam Newton, and I think he's a physical freak like Cam Newton. But I, I'm just worried that you put all the weight of the franchise on somebody that's a little feeble mentally. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. Obviously, if you look at his tape, it's off the chart.
No
But
doubt.
but so was Vince Young's. And he was Vince Young was one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen in college,
Right.
and he looked
When
like
I
a kid.
saw when I saw Caleb Williams crying in his mother's arms over a simple loss in the regular season, I got kind of concerned myself. And with his not having an agent, and with his father being very meddlesome, like LeVar Ball, and just his entourage and everything else, yeah, I have some concerns too. I do think he's a physical freak. I think he's going to be
Yeah.
successful. But is he going to be successful for the number one pick? And is he like a future Hall of Famer type successful? I
I
have
think
my
he's going to be either Patrick Mahomes or a bust. He's either going to get his mental side of it together, and maybe some of that stuff's been overblown, and
Yep.
physically he can beat Mahomes,
Yep.
or he's going to just self-destruct and be Ryan Leaf meets Cam Newton kind of thing.
Right. So the most interesting pick in the entire draft is number 2 with Washington. This is our old franchise. We grew up with the Redskins. Now the Commanders. Who are they going to go for? They're going to go for Drake May. They're going to go for Jaden Daniels. Of course, me as a fan, I'd like them to go for Jaden Daniels. I think he's more ready to start right away. The Commanders traded away all their quarterbacks in the offseason, so they literally have nobody to start under center. And so to me, they need to choose the guy. I don't think really any of these guys are ready for the NFL, but they need to choose the guy who's the closest to ready, and that's Jaden Daniels. He's a multi-threat guy. He can run, he can pass, he can pick up first downs with his legs. He reads the defenses really well. He can go as many as 4 options wide in terms of his reads. Big time player, Heisman Trophy winner, and I think he's going to have success almost right away. Thoughts about Jaden Daniels?
Um, in my research leading up to this, I kind of feel like everything I was seeing was this might be the best player in the draft. He's got all these skills. He's a great leader, and it's weird today when I was looking at a lot of analysis, everyone was bashing him. It was the
Yeah,
weirdest thing. Out of the blue, everyone started saying that he's the most erratic quarterback in the draft. He's makes tremendous mistakes. He misses targets. So I don't know. I mean,
that's not true. That's not
I
true.
think based on what I've seen of him, he should be the second pick in the draft and probably the first quarterback pick. But there
There's
might be some things I haven't seen that I
there's
just
lots of pre-draft banter, and some of it
yeah,
you just have to discount because some
no
of it is
question.
different camps trying to, maybe that's Drake May's camp trying to get to the second pick or something. I don't know, but I completely disagree with that. I've looked at all of his tape. He's incredibly impressive.
He looks great to me.
Yeah.
I will say that you're right in that leading up to this, it's almost been too long of an analysis period where
Hmm.
people are starting to talk themselves out of certain draft picks. And really, I think if these guys were good enough at the end of last fall, that order should remain the same order,
Hmm.
unless something came out like an injury or something like that. But the tape hasn't changed. No one's played a game.
Right.
Nothing really should be changing. It's just the people doing the analysis overthink it a little bit. And so I
Yeah.
think, you know, in that way, go with Caleb Williams. But
Yep.
and go with Jaden Daniels next.
I think all these guys over time are going to be pretty good quarterbacks. I really do.
Yeah, they start getting picked apart to the point where people drop them in the draft, and then somebody else comes up and is the new hot. Last
Right.
week, JJ McCarthy was getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and then the last 2 days I've been hearing nothing but he's just a game manager and he's gonna be a career backup.
But again, it's all about situation. We talked about this in our QB episode, for those of you who watched it, and it's all about situation, which team these guys get drafted by, which offensive coordinator they have, what their offensive line looks like, if they have any weapons, if they have a good offensive-minded coach.
Yeah.
All those things are really important. And, of course, Washington has put a whole new staff in this offseason, including a lot of offensive-minded guys, including Cliff Kingsbury, who's a really offensive kind of quarterback whisperer type. So he'd be a really good first coach for Jaden Daniels. Other needs for Washington, by the way, is offensive tackle, edge, cornerback, and so similar to the Bears, they have a lot of the same needs in this draft.
They also need wide receiver, safety, and tight end. So they have a pretty big set of needs. If I'm Washington, I'm trading down.
Yeah, I would too, but I think they're not going.
Knicks or something. I'm doing something, getting a solid quarterback, but I'm getting other picks too.
I think there's too much pressure to go ahead and take the quarterback now because they have nobody on the roster. So I will say this is the most interesting pick in the entire draft because we don't know if they're taking Daniels or May. There's a lot of rumors that Jaden Daniels is who the Raiders really covet, and the Raiders are sitting at 13. And apparently they covet him so much that if Washington takes Drake May at 2, the Raiders are planning to trade with the Patriots, who said that they're open for business, and go up and get Jaden Daniels at number 3. So apparently the Raiders have that trade preloaded. So we'll see if Daniels is gone by then or if he's still available. That may be the Raiders pick at number 3. And the Patriots get to draft down. They're in complete rebuilding mode, and they just need draft picks. So
you need picks if you're the Patriots, yeah.
And then the Vikings like both Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. And so the question's going to be, if he's still there at 3, will the Vikings trade all the way up to 3 to get Drake May, or will they trade to 5 to get J.J. McCarthy? And that's going to be the real thing to watch as well. Those two teams, the Vikings and the Raiders, are going to be the most active when it comes to trades. So any thoughts about Drake May at number 3 for the Patriots?
I think the Patriots are going to trade out of it. They got burned. They got burned a couple of years ago going with Mac Jones. Everything looked fine with him. He was coming with a stellar record and nice stats, and they went first round and they got burned. I think they're more comfortable picking quarterbacks late because they're old school, like Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells said you never pick a quarterback in the first round, and he did. I think he did one time with Drew Bledsoe, and that was it.
No doubt about it.
Try not to do it because it forces your hand to play him before he's ready, and you end up.
Like you talked about, there's no reason the Patriots can't go get a good guy later in the first round or in the second round.
Yeah, Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler, good quarterbacks that need some time to develop. But I'm hearing that Michael Penix has fallen a lot. I guess because of his size and his injury, but probably has the best arm in the whole draft. So.
Yep. Matter of fact, you can see Michael Penix going all the way on this chart, going down to 31 for the Raiders. So yeah. So. Well, the Patriots' other needs, other than quarterback, are offensive tackle, cornerback, wide receiver, and defensive tackle. So they have a lot of needs too. And it's with a whole new coaching staff and a complete rebuild. Obviously, they really could use the draft picks.
Edge rusher and tight end. They're probably in just as much rebuild as Washington.
No doubt. That's why all these guys are the top 3 picks.
The more picks you have, the better, even if they're lower, because there's so much talent.
So number 4, we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Cardinals. This is kind of a consensus pick. Most everyone has him going in this slot. There are a couple of mocks that I've seen where he's actually dropping down to 5 and going to the Chargers potentially, because the Chargers, as you know, got rid of all their receivers in the offseason. But most people believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to end up going and playing with Kyler Murray in Arizona. Any thoughts about this pick?
I think it's a very safe pick. The chance of him starting on day one is very high. He's going to be that guy that needs to really take two defenders to shut down,
Mhm.
and so he's a real good weapon on offense. I
And the
think
whole.
Cardinals have been starving for skill players for a while,
Mhm.
and so I think he's a great pick actually.
I agree. I think if there's ever a can't miss in the draft, and there never is a can't miss, but he's about as close as it gets in this draft.
Yeah,
Marvin Harrison Jr.
I think him and Brock Bowers
Yeah, him and Brock Bowers. I
are
agree.
cannot miss,
Those are the two that I really, really think are going to be great players, all pro level players.
and Joe Alt.
And Joe Alt. So Arizona Cardinals, other needs other than wide receiver, cornerback, edge, running back, and inside linebacker. So
And guard and safety.
and guard and safety. Yeah.
Well, they
So
need a lot of stuff too. They might want to think about trading down as long as they didn't go down too far.
yeah, possibly they can get a really solid receiver even a little bit lower.
If they were to
So
drop one or two spots, they might still be able to get Marvin Harrison
possibly.
because people would jump up there to go get a quarterback. They're not jumping up there to go get him.
So in Brendan Donahue's draft here, the first trade is going to happen with the Vikings moving up to 5, picking J.J. McCarthy, somebody that they've coveted. Apparently, both McCarthy's camp and the Vikings themselves said that it was the best interview they've ever had. And that goes back something like 30 years in their draft interviews or pre-draft interviews. Apparently, J.J. McCarthy and Vikings just completely hit it off, completely want to play together, and they want to make this happen at almost all costs. Apparently, the only thing that could potentially prevent this is if the Vikings decide to go ahead and get Drake May, who obviously has a little bit higher upside, most people think. So, what are your thoughts about Vikings moving up to 5 with the Chargers and getting J.J. McCarthy?
I think it's a reach. I think it's a reach, and I think he's gonna be fine. Like he's gonna be a pretty decent quarterback. I think he's smart. He's a good game manager, which is not a bad thing. It means you don't make too many mistakes. You get the ball to the weapons in the appropriate time. You get the ball out. You're not taking sacks. I mean, a game manager is a good thing. But
You
if
know
you're
who
only a game manager, then you are a backup, basically.
you know who his two comps are? He's either Josh Allen or he's Kirk Cousins. And to me, I think he's more like a Kirk Cousins. You know, I
I
I
see
really
Kirk.
believe I really believe he's going to be more like a Kirk Cousins. I think that Kirk Cousins is kind of the second round guy who's a very proficient quarterback. Obviously, he just got paid this year. Really good quarterback, can get you into the playoffs. Maybe not take you to the Super Bowl, but he's that really solid guy. The other thing about JJ in this spot, he's only 21 years old, and he can come in and play behind Sam Darnold, who's they're planning to start for a year or two. So it's a nice situation for him to go to the Vikings and be able to develop.
No, I mean I agree. I think JJ McCarthy, that's a great spot for him. I just think it's too much draft capital used to get him.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times the most important thing is not so much where the player was picked, but where they're going
No,
and
that's true.
what their situation is. And you said that kind of earlier, but it
Mhm.
can't be overstated that forcing a guy like Justin Fields into a bad situation, I don't think we've seen what he's capable of yet. I think it was a disaster.
Mhm.
He wasn't ready to start, and they forced him to. And I think he needs to be an apprentice.
Don't you think that Russell Wilson will start the season, but that you'll end up seeing Justin Fields towards the second half of the season? I just have a feeling he's going to take over pretty quickly in Pittsburgh.
Probably,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, I think so.
I
So
personally, I would have stayed with Justin Fields and used my
me
number one
too.
pick to trade down and get multiple picks and load up on. I would have gotten Marvin Harrison. I would have gotten a lineman and an edge rusher, and
Hmm.
I would have made my team so much better than starting over with a new quarterback who might be a bad rookie or a shaken rookie. And then, obviously you have still a nice pick coming up after him. But I just think I think it's the same with the Giants. I think you stay with Daniel Jones, and then you build up around him, you know. And then if
Yep,
he's not the guy, then 2 drafts from now you pick someone else.
no doubt about it. So Vikings other needs other than quarterback, inside linebacker, edge, wide receiver, defensive tackle. So I think Vikings have a really good roster. I think they're just kind of adding pieces at this point. I think Darnold might have a little bit better season than you even think. We'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
no, they'll be competitive.
Number
It's a tough
six,
division, especially if the Bears improve. That's a tough division.
no doubt about it. Well, that's part of their problem is that they have three other killers in their division. All the other three teams in their division are really good.
Yeah,
So the Vikings have got to stay up with them. So number six is the Giants. They are projected to take a wide receiver, and they love Malik Neighbors. Apparently, they brought him in for a private workout. It's looking very, very likely that he's going to go to New York and be Daniel Jones' new number one target. New York has been kind of devoid of weapons for a long time, and this would be a really good move for them. What are your
yeah,
thoughts about the Giants taking Neighbors?
yeah. I mean, letting Saquon Barkley go, they need to have some other focus for their offense. I
Mm-hmm.
think Neighbors. I heard a lot of analysis, and I watched some good film. That at 5 years from now, when you look back, he's gonna be the best player drafted on draft day.
He might be. He might be. His
So,
biggest concern, of course, one of the reasons he's below Marvin Harrison, he's just as good. He's set every record in that program, but
mm,
he's 6 feet, and so there's always a little bit
yeah.
of concern that he's a little undersized.
And they said if he had come out last year, he would have been a number one or number two pick.
No question about it.
He got hurt by the fact that this is a deeper draft. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean that he shouldn't be there at the top.
That's right.
He's a can't miss, really.
Yeah, I agree. So other needs for the Giants, other than wide receiver, cornerback, running back, because they just got rid of their big priced running back, safety, and quarterback. So Giants are one of those teams I was talking about earlier who have a big quarterback in Daniel Jones, but who really should draft somebody this year and try to develop them for a year or two. I don't think Daniel Jones is the long-term answer there. And
No,
so similar to the Sam Darnold situation, I think Daniel Jones is very quickly going to become the bridge quarterback to whoever they draft this year and try to
but they're so
develop.
fortunate because they're good quarterbacks all the way through the third and fourth rounds.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
you know,
So number 7, we got the Titans taking Joe Alt. They have coveted him from the very beginning of this draft process. There is some scenarios I've seen where the Chargers at number 5 stay at 5 and take Joe Alt and try to get the big left tackle that they need to run the running game that Jim Harbaugh wants to run. They already have a all-pro left tackle in Slater. So they're talking about maybe taking Joe Alt and starting him first at right tackle until Slater retires. So then you'd have two big studs on the offensive line. But most people think he's going to end up dropping to 7, and he'll be Tennessee's first pick. What are your thoughts here?
well, I think he's one of the more pivotal picks in this draft because there are not that many. There are not that many Joe Alts in this draft. They are saying this is a heavy draft for offensive tackle,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that the top ones separate themselves. And I think, I've always said this: you build in the trenches first, then you get your skill positions, and the last thing you do is you start the clock with the quarterback because you have 5 years with the
Right,
quarterback, and then you
right,
got to start paying him 50 million, and you got to start dumping players like the Bills have. Um, you
right,
you you have to prolong how long that clock ticks for, and give your window as wide of a window as you can. The dumbest thing you can do is go get your quarterback first while you're building up your team. You're beating up your quarterback and potentially breaking him down. But by the time he does get good, you're 1 year away from having to pay him, and then you're still maybe not even sure because you haven't given him that many weapons. I've seen that on way too many teams. They're like Tua, they're 1 year away from having to pay 50, $60 million to a quarterback that you're not even sure of.
right,
They just paid Daniel Jones and they're not sure about him.
right.
Um, teams are making this mistake, and the way you avoid it is by building up your trenches, then get your skill players, and make sure you have a star at each level of the defense, and then get your quarterback last or close to last. Let him sit for a year, so you're still putting your linebacker in place, and you're getting your edge rusher, your second edge rusher. Like the Lions need a second edge rusher, um, and then you get your quarterback. Maybe put your young guy behind a veteran, somebody like a Flacco or a
Mm-hmm.
Darnold or something.
Yep.
You don't mail it in that year, but maybe you know you're going to be a wild card team if that. And then you got all these stars starting to bud. All of them are in their rookie contracts, and then your quarterback comes in, and now you've got a 3, 4, 5 year window of real shot at deep playoffs.
Yeah, I mean,
Anything that doesn't really work in the salary cap era.
we've also talked about what you want to get if you're in the top 10 picks in the NFL draft. You want to get your can't misses, right? So, like, I believe the biggest can't miss in the first three is Jaden Daniels. That's just my personal belief. The biggest wide receiver can't misses are Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. And then the biggest can't miss from an offensive tackle perspective is Joe Alt. I just think there's no question about it. The best edge rusher is our next pick with the Falcons, and that is Dallas Turner. The last couple of years, the Falcons have gone into their draft saying that we want to get their big time edge guy, and they ended up not getting him. And it's been very disappointing in Atlanta. Well, apparently this year they are 100% all in on Dallas Turner being their first pick. What are your thoughts about him as their edge pick?
It's a fantastic pick. If you have really good edge rushers, it can put a lot of pressure on an offense and really throw them out of sync. And offenses that are out of sync don't throw the ball well. And
Mm-hmm.
so your edge rusher is not there to really disrupt running, but it's to disrupt the pass. So they have to become one dimensional. And then you
Mm-hmm.
need your tackles up front to really bow up and stop the run. And you can really put a good defense together. You have to have pressure. I'll never forget the Giants, the year they had their secondary all go down in preseason. And they said, we're going to have to be creative. We have to get to the quarterback just a little bit faster than normal. And so they started 4 defensive ends on that defense, and they ended up beating the Patriots, the undefeated Patriots, because they were able to disrupt the offensive schemes because they were in there so fast.
Right.
And that was a good Patriots offensive line and a very effective offense, but they were able to disrupt it and throw it out of sync. And they were able to pull off the win against a team that on paper was better than they were. So,
One thing we didn't mention, we mentioned that situation is so important, especially at the quarterback position, but we never mentioned and should have that your division is also very important.
yeah.
So like we were talking about, the reason the Vikings have got to go get their quarterback of the future is you look at their division, and all the other three teams all have their quarterback locked in.
Mm.
And so same thing with the Atlanta Falcons. They're in a fairly weak division, but look who they're facing. Okay, they got, Bryce Young, they got Baker Mayfield, they got Derek Carr. And what are the aspects of all three of those guys? How do you beat them? You apply pressure to them. They all make huge mistakes
Mm-hmm.
when they get pressured. So the Falcons are looking at, we can win this division if we just get a couple pass
Yeah.
rushers and can run the ball and we get decent quarterback play. So
Any quarterback in the NFL, if they have time, down to the third string of the worst team in the league, can pick you apart if he has time. That's
yep.
what's special about NFL quarterbacks. Even what you think of as the worst guy in the league, some scrub, is so good at picking apart a defense if he doesn't have a Michael Strahan running in on him or
Yep.
one of these.
I think about the Falcons thinking that they can win that division. They just picked up Kirk Cousins at quarterback, right? They've got
Mhm.
some really nice weapons. They need to work on their defense, and they've got to get some of these impact guys, and they can win that division. That's what they're thinking.
The way you start building your defense is one star at each level.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you really make a difference. And then you try to have as many guys around them that are talented, and you're just rotating with depth, and
Right.
that's how you build it.
So,
You
so
can't
other
spend 9 picks on a defense.
so other needs for the Falcons other than edge is cornerback. They need a good, solid
Mhm.
cornerback. They need defensive tackle. They need safety, and of course, they already took care of the quarterback position. Although they could use a good backup, but those are kind of the Falcons' needs. Let's move on to pick number 9. This is Chicago. They need a major weapon on the other side for Caleb Williams.
Mhm.
They already picked up, of course, the Panthers' number 1 receiver last year. This year, they're going to try to pick up another receiver, and most pundits think it's going to be Rome Odunze, who's, some people have him the best wide receiver in this draft. So if they are able to get him at 9, I think it's a huge win for them. And I can imagine Odunze and Caleb Williams pairing up together for the next 5 to 10 years. What are your thoughts about this pick?
Great pick. He's a star. He's going to be really really good. Um, he proved against very good competition that he's a real threat. So I think to give him to Caleb Williams is pretty outstanding. And then you add in all the other guys they've gotten this year. Um, you know, he could be an amazing number 3. So
I love Malik Neighbors, and I think he and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to be great. But there's something about Odunze when I watch him just dominate the best division of football.
mhm.
He's not only fast, but he's big. He just reminds me of like a DK
he,
Metcalf. He's
he's
like a
tall.
faster DK Metcalf.
Yeah, not quite
and
as built, but yeah,
he's not
good.
quite built, but he
Pretty
just
solid.
reminds me of him. The way he
I know.
plays, he's very physical,
I agree.
and yet he can stretch the field too. So it's really wild. He's
Just
kind of,
imagine him with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen.
I know.
He's
They
number
have
3.
really nice weapons.
He will
Yeah.
crush any third corner that any team has.
And then they have a tight end, Komet, who's really been coming on. So
Yeah,
they have a nice offense now. They really do. They got to work
they
on their
need
offensive
they
line.
need some running backs and an offensive line help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they still have pieces they need.
They're building something now. I don't know if they're quite playoffs this year, but they're definitely building something in Chicago.
I'm hearing playoffs, but I'm not buying it until Caleb Williams has a little experience and we can see what he's like under pressure.
I
He's
agree.
never faced pressure like this, so we'll see.
So number 10, the Jets. If they're able to pull this off with Brock Bowers, the tight end at number 10, I think that's one of the best picks in the draft.
Hmm.
You and I have talked about scarcity. None of the Super Bowl winning teams for basically the last 10 years have done it without a major all pro pass catching tight end.
Yep.
And this guy, I really believe he's even better than some of the guys we have in the league now. We'll see if that's true, but he's like a Swiss Army knife. He can line up at any position. You can put him in motion. You can hand it off to him. He can play fullback. He can block. He can run like a wide receiver. He runs incredible routes, does drag routes that are uncoverable. Um, just an incredible pick. What do you think about Bowers, number 10?
I don't think it's exaggerating to say that he might be easily one of the best athletes at tight end that we've seen in a long time or ever. I'm not sure, but he's an incredible weapon. I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 picks in the draft. I think it's a steal to get him that low. I think he should be in the top 3 picks
Yeah, me
because
too.
he gives you that edge to go over the top of defenses can't stop him, but they can stop wide receivers with double coverage. You're not going to double cover a tight end. So
Don't you, don't you think Aaron Rodgers is just praying right now that he gets Brock Bowers?
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
imagining him a
they've
big
been
year.
showing up. The Jets have been showing up their offensive line through free agency. They got Edwin, I mean not Edwin, Morgan Moses,
Hmm.
and they do have some other linemen later in the
They
draft
got
that they
Tyron
played
Smith.
for.
They got Tyron Smith from the Dallas
Tyron
Cowboys.
Smith. So the
Yeah.
left and right tackles are taken care of,
Yep.
and now they need to draft backups for those.
Hmm.
And then you're cooking. You got Brees Hall, and you've got you know an incredible quarterback. And if you add Brock Bowers, that's
Hmm.
all Aaron Rodgers needs
I know.
is somebody who can hurt a defense in so many different ways.
It's true. Other needs that the Jets have, other than tight end, safety, wide receiver. They need another wide receiver for sure. Linebacker and cornerback. So those are some of the other positions they need to look at.
And tight end.
Yeah, I mentioned tight end. Yep.
Yeah.
Number 11, the Chargers. This, of course, they would get this number 11 pick from the Vikings in the trade that is proposed here. And the Chargers want to run the ball. It's just quite simply Jim Harbaugh believes in smash mouth. He believes in ground and pound. And he believes that the passing game feeds off of the running game. And so the only way he's going to be able to do that is if he loads off on offensive linemen. So he's reconstructing this roster from ground up. And he believes J.C. Latham is the second best tackle in the draft. What are your thoughts about this pick?
I think it's smart. I think that's how you do it. You build through the trenches, and it doesn't necessarily put people in seats, but before you know it, you're running the ball down people's throats like the Lions are out of nowhere. They've been building for years, and they've been building up their lines, and now it's paying off. And so this will pay off 3 years from now when people are trying to figure out how the Chargers got so good. Also, the protection. You watch Joe Burrow. The Bengals are picking in the draft. They're picking guys like Jamar Chase and skill position players while their offensive line's mediocre. And Burrow's spent 3 out of the last 5 years on the injured reserve. It's a waste of his talent if you're not going to get an incredible offensive line in front of him.
It's interesting. The Chargers fans apparently are already kind of moaning and complaining online that they're not going to stay at 5 and take Malik Neighbors and give Justin Herbert a weapon. But to me, anytime you can trade down and it's not that far down and you pick up your left tackle of the future, and then you can see later in the draft, in this scenario, they're picking up a Donnie Mitchell, who's a really excellent receiver from Texas. So I think some fans just don't quite understand how to build a roster, and I think this is a really good move for the Chargers.
Right. I mean, look, J.C. Latham's not going to put seats in the people in the stands.
Right.
He's not going to get people real excited. That's part of the problem is you have to build in a way that doesn't really create a lot of excitement. So one smart thing if you're a GM is try and get one good splash pick where everyone's really excited and you sell a whole bunch of new jerseys, new uniforms. So you want to see those all over the stadium. But the truth is, if you build it the right way, the first steps are paying the bill first. And you pay the bill by getting your trenches strong. And then you second level and running back and, wide receiver. And then you got your veteran quarterback in there hanging on. And then you bring the young guy in behind him. And then his window starts and you launch out and you're good for a while like the Chiefs have been. And this is
other needs for the Chargers. You've got wide receiver, of course, because they lost their top 2 wide receivers, cornerback, inside linebacker. We already talked about offensive tackle and running back. They lost their starting running back as well. So, they're not quite in rebuild mode. They've got an excellent starting quarterback and they've got a lot of nice pieces on defense, but you can see they still have a lot of needs on offense. And so I do trust Harbaugh is going to turn them around very quickly, though.
I think trading down is smart.
Yep, me too.
So that's when you have more than a couple needs. You have,
So this draft, this mock has Washington moving up a little bit from down below in the first round up to 12 to go get the 3rd best tackle in the draft, which is Fashanu. There's some mocks I've seen where Fashanu actually went 1 spot above Joe Alt. So some people actually believe he's the best tackle in this draft. This would be a huge deal if they could swing this off, and I would understand why they trade up to get him because you need to get your left tackle for Jaden Daniels, right?
What I'm hearing is that he's got a nice demeanor for offensive line. He's kind of mean. He's got some edge to him, and I think you pick him because you want your offensive line to be a little tougher,
right?
And get into smash mouth mindset. And
That's right.
No one's going to be living in the training room and because their calf's a little sore. I mean, they're going to be accountable, and so you want guys like him. And Ndamukong Suh is like that. They just have a bad disposition.
Just a baller, yeah. Just a baller.
Baller. You want somebody that's got some attitude. And
now I really understand why they would do this My only concern about it is you see who they traded with, which is the Denver Broncos, who are sitting in 12. I think the Broncos believe they can get their quarterback of the future in the second round. And the Broncos, they burned a lot of their picks trying to get Russell Wilson. And so they're trying to rebuild some of their draft capital by doing this trade down. So, it would make sense for Washington. They could get their 10-year tackle, and it would make sense for the Denver Broncos, who don't have many picks and are trying to get some picks in the second and third round.
Smart.
Yeah, it could make sense for both of them. So number 13, we got Terrion Arnold. Some people believe he is the best cornerback in this draft, and in this scenario, he'd be going first from Alabama. He's a little undersized, but excellent hands. He's kind of a ball hawk type cornerback. Very hard to get separation on him. He has a lot of highlight plays out of his Alabama career. And apparently he impressed by far the most at the combine of all the cornerbacks. So not surprised at all to see him going first and going to the Raiders at 13. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean they need corner. They need quarterback, offensive tackle, running back, corner, of course, defensive tackle, linebacker. They need a lot of players. So, you need to start at each level.
I mean, who do they have on their roster? They've got O'Connell and they've got Gardner Minshew, right? So neither one of those guys is going to set the world on fire. So
right.
They do still need a quarterback, but I think they feel like if they can't get Jaden Daniels, which it looks like they won't in this scenario, then they can get the guy they want much later in the first or in the second. So that's their
second round.
Yeah. And cornerback is you talked about scarcity. This is a scarcity pick.
Yeah. And they have Max Crosby, so they're not struggling on edge rusher. And then they need to look at each level of the defense and strengthen it however they can.
I think about who the Raiders have in their division. They got Patrick Mahomes. They got Justin Herbert. So, I mean, you need cornerbacks, right? So other needs that they've got, obviously quarterback we talked about. They need an offensive tackle as well. They need a wide receiver, and they need an inside linebacker. So definitely some needs on the Raiders roster.
14, and that's why I would not trade up to get a quarterback if I'm them. That's why I wouldn't.
Right. 14, the Saints, they've got them going for the next offensive tackle on the list, which is Fuaga, another really excellent player. I actually was looking a little bit at his film yesterday, along with Fashanu, and was really impressed. He's such a pancaker, and he's such a baller. He's kind of, like you said, he kind of plays mean. Apparently, the Saints did a really critical analysis of their offense after their disappointment last year. Not winning the division, which they thought they were going to. And what they found was their offensive line play was not only bad, but came in ranked 28 out of 32. And so the Saints determined their number one problem in the offseason was they had to get the offensive line stout. And so this goes a lot towards that objective for them to try to protect Derek Carr. He had a very subpar year compared to what they expected. What are your thoughts about this pick?
I think it's a great pick. I think you start there, and if that's a weakness, then it's the most important thing to strengthen first.
No doubt. Other needs that they've got: wide receiver, cornerback, defensive tackle, linebacker. So just plugging some holes there for the Saints. They have a pretty good roster. It was a disappointing year last year, but I think they can kind of get back to where they want to be. 15, we got the Colts with Quinyon Mitchell. He's the second best cornerback on the board. The Colts feel like their offense is pretty decent. You've got their quarterback draft pick from last year only played 4 games coming back. So that's really going to help. It was one reason they were okay with getting rid of Gardner Minshew. They have some nice weapons, both at receiver and running back, of course. So in this case, they're trying to go defense a little bit and make that unit a little bit more stout. Thoughts on the Colts?
I think it's just a good, safe pick. I think they're smart in not doing anything too flashy. You know, they got their quarterback ready to go. So
Got the cornerback, and then if you think about who they got at receiver, they got Michael Pittman, they got Kenny
yeah,
Moore, they got Zach Moss, who was a huge surprise last year. They had running back Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the top three backs in
yeah,
football. So they've got a solid offense.
yes,
So going defense makes a lot of sense.
yep.
Number 16, we got Troy Fontenot, who's an offensive lineman. He can actually play tackle or guard. Seattle is very much in need of a left guard right now. So apparently they're planning to plug him right into their left guard position. Try to continue to protect Geno Smith and evolve that offense. Thoughts on this pick here?
It's a great need pick. Um, you know, you have to get offensive linemen if that's plentiful in this draft. I know I
Mm-hmm.
always talk about how scarcity matters, but when you have a draft that has a special amount of players in one position group, you have to get one coming away from that draft, especially knowing next year might be a lot weaker. It looks
Mm-hmm.
that way right now. So, yeah, load up on linemen and quarterbacks and wide receivers in this
So,
draft.
so it's interesting. They just announced their new coaching staff that they got that they're going to open up the quarterback position and have an open competition in camp this year between Geno Smith and Sam Howell. And they're not sure who's going to actually win that battle. But either way, they're hoping to have a much stouter offensive line for either guy, whoever starts. 17, we got Cooper DeJean, who's the one of the better cornerback prospects. Total ball hawk. I was watching some of his film. Apparently, the Eagles very much covet him. So I'm wondering if they're going to try to come up and get Cooper DeJean instead of the Jacksonville Jaguars. But in this scenario, the Jaguars take him at 17. Any thoughts on this pick at cornerback?
I love this player. I mean, the picks, the film I was watching of him was remarkable. Just the picks, the way he could flag down a ball running backwards over his head, out jumping,
Yeah,
a great wide receiver. Just an incredible athlete. I bet you he's good at everything he does,
he is. Did you notice that a lot of his picks, he was reading the offense and they were
Yeah,
crossing routes that another DB was trying to cover, and he was coming from another position
yeah,
across the field. He knew what route was being run, and he would just pick it off. It was like he knew what play was coming. It was crazy. He did that a
yeah.
lot in his career.
He has an
Again,
incredible feel for it.
Again, you see in this scenario the Eagles taking Nate Wiggins down at 28, but apparently they very much covet this guy Cooper DeJean. So
Yeah.
we'll see if they might want to try to trade up and get him. Other needs for the Jaguars, they've got a lot of needs.
Mhm.
So we talked about cornerback, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, um, inside linebacker, and edge rusher. Apparently,
It's,
all of those needs they're going to try to address in this draft.
it's not good when you need tackles and guards and edge rushers and defensive tackles. That
I know,
means
but
your trenches are completely barren, and I don't know.
and cornerbacks.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they need. They're in a rebuild, whether they want to admit it or not.
What's interesting is 2 years ago, that wasn't the perception of Jacksonville. They just kind of fell apart last year.
Well, they
I'm
had some
not sure.
nice receivers that they got rid of. Not stars, but definitely twos
Mhm.
and threes, and they got rid of a lot of linemen.
Yeah, that's
You know,
right. This year they
remember?
got Gabe Davis from Buffalo, so it'll be interesting to see how he
Yeah,
does.
they need to rebuild their trenches. Um, that's a lot of needs in offensive and defensive lines,
It
and
is.
so it doesn't really matter how good a receiver you get right now. You're not going to be able to protect um, Lawrence. So
It's true.
just do the unpopular thing and do the right thing.
Right. 18, we got the Bengals taking Byron Murphy, the defensive lineman, really solid DL. Apparently, he can play both outside and inside. They're planning to play him inside, but Bengals have a lot of pride on that defense. They always create and apply a lot of pressure. Thoughts about this Murphy pick?
It's a good one. They've been addressing their offensive line problems through free agency.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been screaming about the Bengals for a few years now about how they're not prioritizing the offensive line, and the results are Joe Burrow's on IR. They are addressing it right now, so they don't have to necessarily use draft picks for it right now because they've been doing that through free agency. But I like this pick. I think getting star defensive linemen, it's one of the most important things you can do.
Do you know what the comp was on Byron Murphy? I thought this was a huge compliment.
No.
Aaron Donald. They said he's
Oh,
the next.
wow.
He's like this big beast up the middle. He applies a lot of pressure from the nose tackle position.
Yeah.
He gets sacks and everything. So that'll be really cool to see if they get an Aaron Donald like player. Maybe not quite as good, but at 18, you get a guy like that. That's a huge pick for them.
Yeah.
He's going to be very disruptive.
Yep, that's the key. Disrupt their offense and then be able to block long enough to execute your offense. Those are kind of the most basic things in the NFL, and those are what the good teams are doing.
That's right. So other needs for the Bengals, other than defensive tackle, offensive tackle for depth, cornerback, wide receiver, and tight end. So they can always use another guy on the other sideline for them to throw to. 19, we got the Rams, their first pick in a long time. They had no first or second round picks last year because they went and got their quarterback to win the Super Bowl. And this year they finally have a first round pick, and they're going for Latu, the edge rusher. Again, because Aaron Donald has now retired, they feel like there's a real need to find guys who can apply pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts there?
I mean, they're right. That's what they need.
So they've got both defensive tackle and edge. Both are their biggest needs in this draft. So apparently the Rams are going to kind of go very defensive in this draft.
Smart.
Yeah. 20, you got the Steelers taking Amarius Mims, another really solid offensive tackle. Some believe he's in the top 3 offensive tackles in this draft. You can see that there really are some solid tackles in this draft that are going to be tackles for a long time in the NFL. Yeah. Pittsburgh thinking, we got to protect Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. So let's get our left tackle of the future.
Yeah, no, they're right. They're absolutely right.
Other needs that they've got, other than that, they've got inside linebacker, wide receiver, cornerback, and defensive tackle. So Pittsburgh still.
They need a center.
In center. Yeah, in center. So Pittsburgh trying to plug some holes there. We got the Cardinals. They've been kind of coveting Jared Verse for a long time. Apparently a couple of other teams are too. So this scenario has the Cardinals trading up to 21 to get Jared Verse, who's one of the most versatile edges in this draft. And they feel like he could be a real impact player for that defense. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts there?
I mean, I think that's smart to have a nice balanced approach of helping your offense in some of the biggest needs, and then helping your defense apply pressure. Smart.
No doubt about it. He's kind of reminding some people of kind of like a Brian Burns type player, the Panther who just went to the Giants.
On my list, the 2 biggest needs for Arizona are wide receiver and defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. So and edge rusher, and then corner, guard, and safety. So, edge rushing and wide receiver. That's smart. Get those 2 in the first round.
22, we got Buffalo taking Brian Thomas Jr., a wide receiver. Of course, they got decimated by losing their top 2 receivers in the offseason. So they got to get Josh Allen some weapons, and they need cheap weapons because they're now paying Josh Allen. You always talk about that. So they're going to have to rely on rookies. Yeah. They'll probably end up taking 2 wide receivers in this draft at least. They already have a really good tight end who's an all-pro level tight end. So they need to just fill the outsides on both sides. Thoughts about this pick?
I think it's a great pick. I think this wide receiver right here is going to be sneaking under the radar, and I think people are going to be looking back, not believing that he was picked that low.
I'm kind of surprised he moved to 22. I agree. We talked about this in our pass catchers episode.
Yeah.
And Brian Thomas was one of those guys that was kind of a look out for him kind of guy.
Yep.
Same thing with the next pick, Adonai Mitchell. And if the Chargers can get him at 23 and give Justin Herbert a weapon out of Texas, I was really impressed with his film. He didn't quite have some of the stats that some of the other bigger guys had, but the plays that he did make, he's just not only a blazer in terms of speed, but he's very physical, uses his body really well. Boxes people out for possessions. He goes up
Yeah.
and gets the ball. He's kind of a baller at wide receiver. I
Yeah.
really like Donnie Mitchell. That'd be
No,
a good
he's
pick.
really good. Remember, he's coming from a program that really likes to run the ball. So, Texas, you may not put up the biggest stats in the world. Doesn't mean you're not one of the better wide receivers coming out. I think he's a great pick. I think Thomas and Mitchell in most other drafts would be higher. They'd be top tens,
No doubt about it.
maybe like 8, 9, or 10, something like that.
So number 24, we got Dallas Cowboys. They have to fill a huge hole in Tyron Smith, their future Hall of Famer tackle. And they're saying that they're going to go ahead and take Tyler Guyton and hope that he's able to plug right into that spot and be as good as they think he's going to be. This is their number one need in the offseason. Any thoughts about this selection?
I think it's smart. You got to protect Dak and whoever comes after Dak. Yeah, I think
They
the chance of Guyton going in and starting is higher than it is one of the other skill position guys. So,
Dallas has a lot of question marks in this offseason, and they didn't do very much. I mean, they probably did the least amount of activity of any team in the offseason. It really was kind of a head scratcher.
well, they're handcuffed to Dak's
Salary.
salary.
Yeah, because they lost Pollard, they lost Tyron Smith, they lost one of their big cornerbacks. They're thin at linebacker. I don't know. They have a lot of needs. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
We'll
I think
see. But
most
this
of
is
their
good
on
first.
defense.
This is a good foundational piece. Get your
Yeah.
offensive tackle. 25th, same thing. Graham Barton. Apparently, he can play both inside and outside. Packers' line's already pretty good. They're planning to plug him in at either left or right guard and start him there. But he's a really solid offensive lineman, and they'll just keep adding pieces to an already really good offense. What are your thoughts about the Packers?
That's a very good line. Bakhtiari's retiring, so it's a need pick. They need to make sure that they don't have drop off.
Right.
I think it's a good pick because they need it so much.
No, agreed.
Bakhtiari is a great one. So,
and they have a lot of weapons on that offense, and they have got obviously Jordan Love playing really, really well. They've got a good tight end. Build the line. That's where you want to build it. 26, you got Chop Robinson. He's another one of the edge rushers who's really made a big name for himself. I was really surprised watching his tape. He plays so ferociously.
yeah.
I mean, he plays like he's just angry on every play. It's really amazing to watch.
No.
He's like a wrecking crew.
Today.
He was going right through double teams all the time. I was like, oh my God, they're trying to double team a guy, and he just splits right through them, and they can't stop him.
No.
So I'm really excited to see him play.
He's a bulldozer.
I'm a little sad he's going to one of the Panthers' big rivals, but
Yeah.
Obviously he's going to help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What are your thoughts about Tampa and the edge pick here?
I think he's ferocious. He's ferocious for an edge rusher. He's very disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
Just watching tape on him today, it was some of my more impressive video I've seen is watching him. He was in backfield, tearing people to pieces and, tackling wide, running backs and just all kinds of stuff.
It's interesting because Tampa, they signed a lot of their offensive guys in the offseason to extensions, including Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield. Their top 5 needs in this draft are all defensive. So they've got edge, linebacker, cornerback, safety, and inside linebacker. So you can tell kind of where Tampa's going to go this year. They feel like their offense is pretty much set. And
Yeah.
that they need to go defense, defense,
They
defense.
locked up Mike Evans.
Yep,
Uh, so Baker's, okay. And then, yeah, they really need to beef up their defense.
that's right. So we get 27. We got the Dolphins, your team. We got
Yes.
Newton, the defensive lineman. The feeling here for the Dolphins is that their offense is pretty stacked, and
Mhm.
that where their real needs are right now is on the defensive side of the ball. What do you think of this pick?
Yeah, I mean, the Finns lost Wilkins, mostly because of salary, and the smart move is to try not to have any fall off at a lower salary level. So I think it's smart. You do the best you can to manage your salary cap, and a lot of times the question is, do I want to pay somebody and put ourselves in a position where we can't get depth, or go with a rookie who looks
Mhm.
really ready, and you hope he can grow a little bit and get a little better. And I think it's a smart pick.
You know what's interesting is the Dolphins are sitting at 21 at the beginning of the draft, and in this scenario, they're trading with the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are going up to get Jared Verse, the edge rusher. I wonder why the Dolphins don't just stay there and go ahead and get Jared Verse. I mean, he's just one of those
because
impact players.
because they don't feel so much like they need edge rush. Because Jalen Phillips is coming back, and they're saying that
Mhm.
he's looking good. And of course they have Chubb coming back healthy too, hopefully. So
Mhm.
I think they feel like up the middle is where we're soft. They were easy to run the ball on.
Mhm.
They need guys that are going to be beasts in the middle.
Well, you look at some of those Buffalo games, and I just was tearing my hair out because they just
Yeah,
ran up the middle every play,
yeah, and
including Josh Allen. Yeah,
that's why, by the way, not paying Wilkins was probably smart, because he had a really nice season, but he
yeah,
wasn't quite good enough for the big payday.
right.
And there were moments where he looked real pedestrian. So
And
I'm
also, they weren't winning the big games. They were beating up on bad teams, but
yeah. Well,
in the big
that's
games, they weren't winning them. So
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But I think they have a lot of room for improvement on that defensive line.
right. So other needs for the Dolphins, they got inside linebacker, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, edge, and tight end. So those are kind of their top five
Yeah,
needs
for
this year.
sure.
I would agree with tight end. I think that they've gone long enough now without having a premier tight end
Yeah,
to add to that offense.
yeah. The problem is, in this draft there are not that many tight end possibilities.
Yeah, well, there are some good ones. They could pick
No,
up one
there's
of them.
some, but it's not a heavy part of this draft. There's a handful of them. We covered them in our receiving uh, tight ends, but there's 3 or 4 really good ones, and
Yeah.
if you don't get one of those,
So
you know,
28, we got Nate Wiggins going to the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a cornerback. I talked about earlier the Eagles really covet Cooper DeJean, but he's not going to make it this far. So, this seems like a really good pick. Nate Wiggins is a solid cornerback prospect. They could get at 28. What are your thoughts about this one?
yeah. I mean, I think corner um, is such a difficult position that going to your backups is a very dangerous situation. You saw how important in the Super Bowl having good corners is. I think when you draft a good corner, there's no guarantee that they're going to be the guy. So look
Hmm.
at J.C. Horn in Carolina. Great
Hmm.
when he's healthy, hurt a lot. So you don't know if somebody's going to work out, even if they're playing decently well. So
Hmm.
depth can be the key there, and so I think that's smart.
No doubt about it. Other needs for the Eagles: inside linebacker, offensive tackle, wide receiver, and safety. So those are some of the things they're looking for in this draft.
Yeah,
Try to
they
build.
actually need a lot of things. They got a little bit old.
No, that's right. Yeah, I don't know what happened last year. It was kind of strange.
They need to turn over a bunch of their team with younger guys on smaller salaries, and try and recover from overpaying Jalen Hurts. you know.
So this next pick's really interesting to me. Kool-Aid McKinstry. He's a cornerback, and I watched quite a bit of the combine this year for the first time, a lot of it actually. And I was watching the cornerbacks. The two guys who popped off the page were Terry and Arnold, who in this scenario goes 13 to the Raiders. And the other guy was Kool-Aid McKinstry. I mean, he was just all over the place, making plays, breaking things up, making interceptions in the little 7-on-7 drills. And I don't know, there was something about him. He really popped off the page. So I think the Lions might get a pretty good player here.
Yeah. Yeah, he's going to add a lot for that defense.
It's already a great defense, but yeah, you add a lockdown guy. So some of their needs: cornerback with McKinstry, edge, safety, wide receiver, and offensive tackle. So they already have a really solid roster, but they're just kind of trying to add pieces around the edges now. So at 30, we got the Baltimore Ravens, Jordan Morgan, offensive line. You can never have enough depth, even though they feel pretty good about their line right now. But Jordan Morgan's one of those guys that can play inside or outside. Pretty solid pick here. What are your thoughts about the Ravens beefing up their line?
Well, they lost Morgan Moses
Right.
to the Jets, so they have to replace him. So I think it's a smart move. Get younger at that position and bite the bullet and pick as early as you can the best guy available.
They lost Morgan Moses, and they also lost John Simpson, who was their left guard. So in effect, they're trying to fill two holes right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes a lot of sense they would go
They're
offensive
probably
line.
gonna have to pick more than one, and probably maybe even get one through free agency or something.
Probably. So really interesting pick at 31. You got the Raiders picking up Michael Penix Jr. He's one of the guys they really coveted. They were feeling like if they couldn't get Jaden Daniels at 3, that they were going to wait and get their quarterback much later in the draft, either late first or early second. Seems like this would be a really good pickup for them. As we talked about earlier, their quarterback room right now doesn't excite anybody. What are your thoughts about Michael Penix going to the Raiders and developing there?
Yeah, I think he's a steal at this spot. He's a steal. I think he should be in the top 15 to 10, somewhere in there. And I think the Raiders are going to love having him.
It's interesting.
I would say that he really needs to sit for a year, though.
No, I would agree with that. I don't think he's fully ready right away. They do
He
have
might
O'Connell.
have the best arm in the whole draft.
They've got O'Connell and they've got Gardner Minshew. So the good news is that you can let him learn for a year, let him hold the clipboard, and bring him along the right way. I hope they do that if they do take him. I really hope that
if you draft late first round, you do have that luxury sometimes. But if you're in the top 6 picks with a quarterback, you have to play him, and he may not be ready.
That's right. Interestingly enough, Mr. Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, this is the position he went in late in the first round, his draft year. He got looked over by many, many, many teams. And, it's just interesting to think if Michael Penix might be one of those real steals of the draft at this position. We shall see. Number 32, this particular scenario has the Chiefs with their number one need being wide receiver. Especially since their new rookie Rashid Rice is now in legal trouble, may not be playing for a lot of the year, or even maybe be out the entire year. They were already short on receiver already. So Lad McConkey, a really solid receiver from Georgia, was part of their kind of national championship run last year. What are your thoughts about this pick, last pick in the first round?
He's a fantastic pick. They're talking about how he may not have that much combine speed, but he's got a lot of video that you can watch. The tape doesn't lie, and he had a great career and part of a juggernaut program. I think he's ready to come in and be a number 2 or 3 receiver and be really impactful.
No, I agree. He's interesting prospect. I was really kind of hoping he would fall to the Panthers, early in the second round. He's one of those guys. He's a possession receiver, but he's a little shiftier than that. If you watch his film, he just gets open. I don't know how he does it because he's not a speedster.
He's kind of like Wes Welker, but a little bigger. But he's bigger.
Yeah, that's right. He's kind of like that. His comp was Ed McCaffrey. It's kind of like an Ed McCaffrey type possession.
I feel like he's like Welker because he's always open, and you
Yeah,
can't
possession
explain why that
receiver,
is.
runs amazing routes. He does a lot of double fakes, and the guys go for it. So he a lot of plays he just it's total broken coverage, and he's wide open.
You know what I
So
heard? I heard analysts saying that he is a destroyer of zones.
yes.
He absolutely destroys zones.
Hmm.
You can't
And
play zones
actually,
with him.
and actually, if you watch our Super Bowl review, both pre and post that Rob and I did early in the channel, you'll see that one of the major reasons that Kansas City won that Super Bowl in the second half was San Francisco went to zone, and it's just inexplicable why they did that. But that's what Patrick Mahomes was hoping for, right? And
Yeah,
imagine if Patrick Mahomes had this guy too, who's a zone destroyer, along with the weapons he already has. It could be fun to watch.
yeah, yeah.
So that's the end of the mock four for Brendan Donahue. Let's take a look at Ryan McChrystal. We'll just kind of look at some of the differences here. He essentially has almost all the same picks, so we're not going to go through these in detail, but you will notice that they've got the Chargers staying at 5 and not trading down and go ahead and taking Joe Alt. There's an alternate theory that actually Jim Harbaugh's been kind of pump faking all along, and that's really what he wants to do. He wants to take Justin Herbert's left tackle for the next 10 years. That's personally what I think I would do. I think a guy like that comes along every maybe 5 years, kind of like a Penny Sewell.
Yeah.
He's that kind of pancaking, can't miss, all pro Hall of Fame type prospect.
Right.
So,
And there are weapons um, for your offense later in the draft
right.
that that can really be impactful. You know.
That's right. That's right. Uh, Not many other differences here, except I will point out a couple of others. You got the Falcons, instead of taking Dallas Turner, the edge guy, they're taking Quinyon Mitchell. Their second biggest need is cornerback. And so that would make sense to fill that role there. In this case, you've got Malik Neighbors falling all the way to 7 to the Titans. I don't quite understand why the Titans would take Malik Neighbors. They just picked up a bunch of big time receivers in the offseason. So I don't think that's really a need for them. Also, interestingly enough, in this scenario, J.J. McCarthy goes to the Giants at 6
Mhm.
as the heir apparent to Daniel Jones. So some interesting differences here. And in this one, you've got Michael Penix Jr. going much higher at 13 to the Raiders. So instead of them getting him later in the draft, they're getting him at 13. Any thoughts about some of these picks here and some of the differences?
Yeah, I mean there's some significant differences, especially if you go team by team.
Mm-hmm.
But this is probably more realistic.
Probably. Interestingly enough, your Dolphins stay at 21 in this draft and don't move down, and they take Graham Barton, the offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'd be a pretty good pick to get Tua some more help there.
Yep.
And then in this one, I thought it was very interesting. Cooper DeJean dropping all the way to 30 to the Ravens. I just don't see that happening. I think he's going to go much higher. He's just one of those real impact players that I think is going to go higher in this draft. But overall, for the most part, if you look at the top 15 picks or so, most of them are the same and
Yeah, they're similar.
pretty much consensus. Yeah. So looking at Pat McAfee's draft, I really like to listen to him and listen to what his thoughts are on the draft. And obviously, he was an ex-player, so in this case, he's got Washington taking Drake May
Mm-hmm.
instead of Jaden Daniels. Of course, I personally hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, this is how he sees it laying out. He sees the Patriots going ahead and taking Jaden Daniels, not trading out of that pick. Then Marvin Harrison. Then the Chargers addressing the wide receiver need that they've got, since they don't have any wide receivers right now with Malik Neighbors. They have the Giants taking Joe Alt, and Titans filling their need with Fashanu. Dallas Turner, of course, going to the Falcons, which most people think will happen. And then he has a really interesting scenario here where the Chicago Bears, instead of taking a receiver, go ahead and get Caleb Williams, his tight end for the future, and that's Brock Bowers. What are your thoughts about this list here?
Um, I think Patriots are going to be very gun shy to pick a quarterback in the first round. But I like I like this one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is good.
You'll notice a little mini run on quarterbacks again later in the draft. You got the Vikings staying put
Bowman.
and not trading up and getting J.J. McCarthy anyway at 11. And then you've got Bo Nix going to the Denver Broncos. We know um, that the Broncos very much like Bo Nix and think he could plug right in, kind of like a Drew Brees. And then you got Michael Penix Jr. going at 13 again.
Mm.
Roma Dunze dropping all the way to 14 and being taken by the Saints. It's an interesting pick. In this scenario, you also have your Dolphins picking J.C. Latham as their offensive tackle of the future,
Mhm.
which would be interesting. And then you have Cooper DeJean dropping all the way to 25 to the Green Bay Packers. And Xavier Worthy, you were talking about him a little earlier, dropping down to 32 for the Kansas City Chiefs at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting breakdown here for Pat McAfee. I think actually this one is possible. I'm still disagreeing a little bit with him that Jaden Daniels, I think, will be the number 2 pick. And then I think number 3 could potentially trade, like you said. Be very interesting to see.
I mean, the Chargers do need a wide receiver,
No doubt about it.
and I do think they're in love with Neighbors. It's not far
The,
fetched.
the problem is they want both Neighbors and Joe Alt.
Yeah,
So
that's right. That's
how do
right.
you get them both? Yeah,
You know how I've come down on that. I get the offensive lineman first.
yeah, I know. And the Brock Bowers to Chicago, this is the first mock I've seen, and I've looked at a lot of them the last 2 weeks, probably
Mm-hmm.
50 different mocks. This is the first one I've seen him go to Chicago and play with Caleb Williams.
Me too.
Interesting.
Most of the ones I looked at, Bowers was going to the Jets.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I did see there's some really interesting trade conversations that are um, have happened that I've come across, and some of them. I mean, when you sit there listening to it, you end up feeling like a conspiracy theorist almost because
It's true.
some of them get so crazy. You know, talking about why Caleb Williams wouldn't do physicals, and so
Right.
therefore he's hiding something, and this and that, and you end up listening to this stuff and you get absorbed in it and you start thinking,
Right.
conspiracies. Everyone's keeping things quiet, and no one's telling
Absolutely.
what they're really going to do. But the truth is, it's probably very obvious what's going to happen.
So
And
do you think it's going to be a draft, a trade heavy draft, or do you think it's going to be most people staying put?
I think most people stay put because I think the people that want to trade down want too many picks. And I
Mhm.
don't think people are in the. I think people would be very willing to trade down in this draft because there's so much talent. I don't think there's much willingness to trade up.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's going to be a lot of agreement on what they would give up. Desperate teams, I think, are going to look at desperate teams of the past reaching for quarterbacks
Mhm.
and missing, and
Right.
meanwhile having no offensive line to protect for them, and no weapons and all this stuff. And I just think GMs are smarter now. I think they're not going to make the kind of same mistakes that we've seen even last year, but
Yeah.
as well.
So let's take a look at this breakdown. This is the NFL Network. They had a 5-person panel. This happened last night. It was really, really interesting. I watched it. And they essentially said, well, what would the draft look like if the teams did what they should do, not what they're going to do, but what they should do? And
Mm-hmm.
this was the consensus among this 5-man panel. So essentially, they said the Bears should take Caleb Williams, Commanders should take Jaden Daniels, New England Patriots should pass on the urge to take one of these quarterbacks and should take who they think is going to be a Hall of Fame receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. and actually give the Patriots their first weapon in a long time. Any thoughts about those first 3?
I mean, that's pretty spot on, I guess. I wouldn't do it, but I think I understand why they're saying they should.
Well, if you're Patriots and you think you can get a quarterback in the second round, then maybe you take your wide receiver for the next 12 years. I don't know. It's a
If I'm
thought.
the Bears, I'm keeping what's his name, and I'm trading out of this pick and getting multiple picks, and
No doubt.
I'm trading down a few spots, and I'm going to get Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
to go along with.
But your point about can they really find a trade partner? I think the answer this year is no.
That's the tough part. That's the tough part.
I think this year the answer is no because nobody wants to make the mistakes that the Panthers or the 49ers or others did.
But maybe you just trade it for a later this round, first round pick, and then one first round next year or something.
So the panel said that pick 4 would be Malik Neighbors being the second best wide receiver and Harrison off the board. They had the Chargers picking Fuaga, the offensive tackle, instead of Joe Alt. Apparently the Chargers really like him too. And then they had Joe Alt going at number 6 to the Giants. So this is their projection as to what they would do and what the team should do. What are your thoughts about 4 through 6 here?
I mean, I think Alt is the pick, but I think I'm down with all of these players. You can't lose if you add one of these guys to your squad.
They're all really solid.
Yeah,
Possible Pro Bowler level players.
potentially all of them working out and very few busts here. Traditionally, you're looking at half these players or more are going to be busts. Okay.
And I think the point with this list was interesting because they said this is what they should do, not what they're going to do.
Right. But
So,
I'm saying
like,
this draft, you might have a much lower percentage of busts than normal.
right. So, like in this case, they're saying, the Titans in that scenario should take an offensive tackle, Fashinu, right?
Yeah.
They say the Atlanta Falcons should take Dallas Turner, which they probably will. So, they said the Bears should take Rome Odunze as their wide receiver.
Yeah.
I think all these you can agree with. 10, they said Jets need a wide receiver, so they should take Brian Thomas Jr. I disagree with this. I think they should go with Brock Bowers, but interesting theory here. They said the Vikings should stay put and not waste any draft capital, stay at 11 and pick up J.J. McCarthy. The Broncos in this scenario would pick up Drake May, having a higher ceiling than Bo Nix. At 13, the Raiders would pick up Brock Bowers. They haven't really had a tight end since they lost Waller. 14, the Saints taking Fontenot, another offensive tackle. And then the Colts taking Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver, to be on the other side from Pittman. Any thoughts on these three?
No, they're good. I mean, I don't think Brock Bowers should fall that far, but he's definitely a great pick if you can get him at 13.
No doubt about it. And I think, Adonai Mitchell, that is a little surprising to me because I don't think the Colts wide receiver needs are anywhere, even in their top 5 needs right now. But maybe it's just the best player available sometimes.
It says that their top need is wide receiver, but I don't agree with that.
16, you got the Seahawks taking Jared Verse, one of the top edges in this particular draft. I think that'd be an excellent pick, and the Seahawks like to be defensive minded. So that'd be a solid pick. The Jaguars taking Terrion Arnold. They need a really solid cornerback in a tough division. And then the Bengals taking Byron Murphy. I think almost every draft I've seen, he's their guy. He's the one they really want. He's a guy who's really strong up the middle. Any thoughts on these?
No, these are all need picks. I mean, they're smart picks.
19, you got the Rams taking Quinyon Mitchell. He's a cornerback, another one of their 5 needs. Steelers taking a center, Jackson Powers Johnson. This is the first draft I've seen where he's mentioned this high. And again, this list is what they should do, not what they're going to do. So they're basically saying that they need to get their center of the future. And then they got the Dolphins staying at 21, not trading down and taking a linebacker, Graham Barton.
No, it's interior.
Interior offensive line. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently he's a little undersized, and he's played both center and tackle, I believe.
Yes.
But
yes.
He'd be a great center.
center or guard, or he could probably play both, right? So if he plays guard,
You could probably make him a guard.
he could sub in for center as a backup.
Have him as a backup. Yeah.
Yeah, really good picks there. They got 22, the Eagles staying put and getting Cooper DeJean. He's the guy that they really covet. And they've been making it really well known that they want him very badly. So that one makes a lot of sense. 23, the Vikings, with their second pick of the first round via Cleveland, taking Latu, the edge rusher. And then the Cowboys getting their offensive tackle that they need in J.C. Latham. Thoughts here?
The Eagles would get a steal at 22 with Cooper DeJean.
I know. I'd be amazed if he falls that far. I think if they're going to get him, they're going to have to trade up a couple spots. That's my feeling on it. So 25, we got the Packers taking Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle. You know, they just continue to add to that already good offense, already good line with another great tackle in Mims. The Bucks taking Chalk Robinson. We talked about him earlier being one of the real aggressive edge rushers in this draft, and just kind of a mean somebody coming at you.
Yeah, he's got an edge to him.
Tampa feels good about their offense. They're trying to add to their defense. And then the Cardinals taking defensive tackle Newton from Illinois. Another need pick there. Bills at 28 taking Xavier Worthy. They need a wide receiver. They need really 2 or 3 wide receivers. So Xavier Worthy being the top guy available there. Detroit Lions taking Rackstraw, who's a cornerback from Missouri, really solid player. Actually, I saw him in the combine as well. He was pretty impressive. Ravens taking Nate Wiggins, also a cornerback from Clemson. They continue to add to that defense. 49ers taking Tyler Guyton, an offensive tackle, really solid pick there late in the first round. And then in this case, the Chiefs taking Ladd McConkey. And that it's interesting. More and more of the mocks are coming out with McConkey going that last pick of the first round. Whereas a couple of weeks ago, he was really kind of, around 10, 11, 12 in the second round. So it's interesting that he's moving up.
I've definitely seen him in the second round most of the time.
So what are you literally the most excited about in watching this draft? And
okay,
your kind of final thoughts.
I'll tell you, I was most interested in all the rumors that I've been hearing and reading, and a lot of people are saying the third, fourth, and fifth pick are the ones to watch, where all the action might happen. We might be misreading some people, but that's where the most likely trades are going to happen, where a desperate team wants to beat out another team who's looking at the same player, etc. So Patriots, Cardinals, and Chargers have the picks that we're going to be really interested in, I think. I think that I'm hearing that the Rams are thinking about trying to get Knicks, which would be very interesting. I heard a blockbuster trade rumor: Justin Herbert to Minnesota for an offensive lineman and several picks in this draft and future drafts. Now, that's the kind of trade that you cannot foresee coming. If that rumor were true, that would be earth-shattering.
What's interesting is the reason I think that actually could potentially happen is because the Vikings really believe they're one quarterback away. They really think they have a great roster. Two years ago they started the season 11-1. Last year, were essentially second place in their division. They really think they've got a good roster and are solid. And one reason they shipped Cousins out is because they felt like he was never going to take them to the promised land.
Yeah.
And so, maybe they want to try to go for gold here and try to get one of the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks.
Right. What else? The Jets are secretly really coveting Bowers, so they're going to do almost anything they can to get him. And Josh McCown is currently coaching for, is it Washington?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He was with the Panthers last year.
No, he's currently quarterback's coach for the Vikings.
Vikings. Okay.
And so they're saying that the Vikings are going to trade up to the third pick to get Drake May, because McCown was the quarterback coach for Drake May in Charlotte in high school.
Interesting.
So that's another rumor that they're going to be going for that. One final rumor that's interesting is I was stumbling around and came across somebody talking about how Josh Allen had some inappropriate
I saw that. Text
Twitter
messages and social media posts, things like
Twitter posts that were very inappropriate. There were some racist stuff and some sexual stuff, and apparently later it came out that it was probably a ploy to get some teams to stay away from him. And I think that he really wanted to go to Buffalo apparently, and Buffalo was in on it. They knew about it. So they weren't worried about these tweets. Now, I don't know if that's true. I know that the tweets came out right before the draft, so that part's true. And there's rumors that that Marvin Harrison Jr. is about to do the same thing on draft day and try and get some people a little nervous. And he wants to play with Caleb Williams in Chicago. So he would have to fall to 9, which means he'd have to post some really bad stuff.
It's not going to happen.
Again, rumors, but they're interesting, and we'll see. I will tell you, if things come out about his tweets right before the draft, you know something was cooking.
Look at all the stuff that's dropping about, Jaden Daniels and
Right.
Drake May. Drake May's stupid and Jaden Daniels is inaccurate. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
No, I know.
He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football in the last 5 years, if you watch his tape. So,
and
it's
actually,
just funny how each of these camps will put out things about the other one, and
yeah, I know.
And try
it's
to.
So interesting.
Yeah.
It's totally interesting because some of it's true, and some of it's not, and some of it's totally made up.
And then, like last year, the Panthers go with, a quarterback who's 5'9" and diminutive, but they do because he had a tremendous career at Alabama, and they do because he scored very high on the intelligence test, and C.J. Stroud scored very low on the intelligence test. So you had Bryce Young scoring very high, C.J. Stroud scoring very low, and now apparently because of last year's success by C.J. Stroud, apparently a lot of the GMs this year have discounted that intelligence test, that it's not important, that they're not going to listen to it. So, every year is a little bit different. They all try to gather as much info as they can. It's not a perfect science. The rumors, most of them are not true. You hear about the one with J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings. They're saying that's the best interview they've had in 30 years. So I don't know what that means, if they'll do anything possible to get J.J. McCarthy. But anyway, it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
I can't wait to turn it on.
It's so much drama and so much analysis has been going on that it's finally time to just see who's really gonna do what here. All the trade rumors. I don't think there's gonna be that many trades, but I think there might be some trades of players that are shocking. Like the Justin Herbert one. I don't think that one's gonna happen, but it could be stunning like that.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. Well, everyone, thank you for watching tonight. We're really excited about the draft. Hope you have a great time watching it as well. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We're really excited about what we're doing here and the growth we're having, and it's all because of you. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
All right, we'll see you.
All right. Happy drafting.